All right, Tom, the story we will be telling today is Side-Boob. Do you like that boob? That's my side.
The best of all the boobs.
The greatest. The trend for 2025, the coffee trend.
Oh, tell us, what is the trend?
So I can see this sticking around for quite a long time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I've tried this.
Yeah.
This is 84 days worth of writing, 4 pages a day. Feel free to read it out loud. Oh, that's actually a good page. A really good thing to write. Do you want some stats from our last episode?
Of course.
The number of subscribers on YouTube, -1.
-1. Okay.
So if this episode gets 0 subscribers, we're winning.
Yeah, that's 100% increase. Wait, is that right?
This is an ode to all side boobs out there.
Yeah.
And I just want to celebrate the side boob in
community.
Yes.
You could just put together a whole series of snippets that you could just do right here, or just like you going back on all yours. Like, I'm not going to give my opinion. I'm going to be very.
Hand me my shovel.
Yeah.
You look good. Do I look good?
You look stunning.
Thank you, babes.
Yeah. What do I want in 2025? I want lots of positivity, okay? It's like, you look fabulous right now.
Welcome back, Benny P.
Yay, thank you very much. Good to be back.
You're not just a one-night stand.
Oh, music to my ears right there. Thank you very much, Tom.
This is like proof that it's not just a one-off. I think people got a bit confused as to who you were, what your purpose was with the podcast from the last episode. So just to clarify, you are hopefully going to be a returning guest.
I'd like to think so, or at least if you would like to have me on, then that would be very, very, very kind of you right there. I think, considering that it's been a good few months now since we last did this, we've got quite a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, perhaps maybe 3 months, I think, since the last episode, roughly about that time. That's probably a good length of time, I think, to do these.
Quarterly,
perhaps 4 a year. That could be a good aim. If you do more, maybe 5. If you do less, if our calendars don't align, we do less. But I think the aim is to get you on so we can talk about the wider scope of life and adventure, have some reoccurring themes and stories which we can tell from our own lives, and hope that people, find it entertaining in some sense. I think after the first episode, which was a huge success, by the way, and thank you very much for the pilot episode. I think we did really, really great. This makes this episode the difficult second album. How do we follow from the from the beauty we created? Well, time will tell.
Producer Tom, let's see what we can do here. That's the main thing.
But how are you? We're in the new year, 2025. How is it going so far?
We are, aren't we? So far, 2025 has been a good year for me. I've had what I would deem a characterful year of 2024. So to start 2025 on a slightly more positive note, and I'm using this in the context of work, shall we say, and my dear little coffee van adventures that come from it, 2025 has started well in comparison. So I've got nothing to complain about. How about you, Tom?
It's been a busy start to the year. I haven't really had a break since before Christmas. Christmas was quite hectic, and then I went straight back into work. I recorded a conversation with Deo Kato, who I just published today. And since recording that episode at the end of last year, I've been busy trying to edit it as fast as possible to get it out, because he was very kind to give me the exclusive first sit-down long-form interview that he'd done on his Epic Challenge. So I felt very honoured about that, but also I had to get it out before he's going to be publishing his other conversations he's having with other people. So really pleased to finally get that out of the way. It took me a week longer than I wanted to in the edit, but partly because it was such a long conversation that I wanted to kind of cut it back, but without cutting and taking away any of the main core of the story. But also it's my friend, and I think I'm a bit more vested into making sure I could tell his story right and produce the intro reel, which I produce for every episode, which kind of works as its own like marketing. It goes out on all the social medias. Those take a considerable amount of time. The actual editing of the podcast isn't that much time. It's how do you condense 2 hours of conversation into 90 seconds and make it an engaging 90 seconds. So I always struggle with every episode, but I think more so with Deo in making sure that I could do it justice.
Yeah, when you have such an incredible story like he has, it must be very difficult to try and condense all of that down. So I also think, though, that I'm very excited to actually listen to that podcast. So I can't wait to give that one a listen when I get back.
Do you want some stats from our last episode?
Of course.
I'm going to give you one stat.
Do you want some stats? We have a singular stat.
I think. Well, generally,
the only way is up after this, so it's fine.
Yeah. Yes, and well,
we could get
see.
2 on the next one, maybe.
Okay. Generally, listening figures were great. I think it was a bit of a refreshment from a different kind of tone that this podcast puts out. People were engaged with having something that's a bit more entertaining, a bit more light. So the Spotify analytics were really good. I was really pleased with that. And as you know, I put this out on YouTube as well. And some episodes do really great on YouTube. Some don't hit that well. It's fine. Like the majority of them don't hit, but when they do hit, it's fantastic that I put them out on that platform and I can do something with them. YouTube gives you very specific analytics, and I can see the reach, where it's watched in the world, how long it's been watched for, the average time someone are watching for it, the number of subscribers that I get per video that people have clicked and been like, oh, I like this, and I'll subscribe. So to give you some context, my most popular episode on YouTube is the episode with the documentary makers 6 Inches of Soil. That just really hit a mark, and it's had the most amount of watch time, most amount of views, and the most amount of subscribers I brought in. And I can see on this video now, that video brought me 26 subscribers, which is a fantastic amount for one episode. Really, really pleased, especially this stage of the podcast. Our episode on YouTube, okay, I'll give you some context. Others would give me maybe 1 to 5 subscribers per episode. Sometimes none.
Did we lose some subscribers there, Tom? There's only, I can see the way that this is being lined up right now. So please, Tom, enlighten me.
Our episode, -1.
-1. Okay.
On the first day, someone saw it and was like, nope.
It's like, I don't like that guy. I will unsubscribe. Thank you very much. That's, yeah, I felt like that's a statistic which, well, as you said, we can only weigh us up.
So if this episode gets 0 subscribers, we're winning.
Yeah, that's 100% increase. Wait, is that right? I'm not entirely sure that is.
Not sure how that works.
I'm not sure how that works. Yeah, can't double or nothing.
I think generally when you change kind of direction in a creative kind of platform, there's always going to be people who are like, well, what is this? Sometimes it takes time to bed in. And I hope over time people can see our conversations give this platform a bit more worth. But if not, fair enough. You have the right to unsubscribe if you want to.
You do, but also please do subscribe, okay? Because it makes a world of difference for Tom and I. And I promise that I will actually provide some form of useful content in here, and I will discuss with you about coffee.
Okay. So, well, hang on. This is a great little, we can push this now. Anyone who really, really is enjoying this episode right now and loves Benny P, get onto YouTube and subscribe to this episode. Let's get this going. Positive figures. Come on.
Let's start 2025 off on the right foot, okay, with 1 subscriber. Come on, we can do this.
Just also recapping from our last episode, there's probably one little, I suppose, kind of thing I should talk about, and about maybe a correction or some sort. I don't really know. I put it out there, and 2 people kind of picked me up on this one little thing which I said. I don't know if you guessed what it was, but it was when we were talking about diet. I think you asked me about my diet, and I talked about how being a vegan diet while I did my run streak, and then I came out with a stat that no one in the Western world has a protein deficiency. 2 people, a friend who has a protein deficiency immediately messaged me and said, hang on, there's me. And then a second person who's actually a dietitian, who is a very qualified health professional who works in that sector, also flagged it up. And she came to me and was like, I've got one thing to say about your episode. I was like, is it protein? Apparently, protein deficiency is in the Western world. So I kind of, I hold my hands up and say I didn't really know what I was talking about. I was quoting stats which I'd heard, years ago, which are based on nothing which I've really looked into. However, she did say that the people that she deals with who have protein deficiencies are people who are suffering medically, who have illnesses and diseases and cancer and things like that. People who are really struggling to process food generally. So while I admit that there is protein deficiency in the world, it is under very specific cases. And I think generally most people who aren't ill can get their protein. Am I digging my hole already again?
Not entirely sure here. Yeah. Is it you could have just magnanimously accepted that this, but I kind of like it though.
I was going to get a voice note from her and I've just completely forgotten about it because the nature of our scheduling is all quite last minute. So maybe if anyone wants to, no,
you do not want to do that.
No, let's move on.
You could just put together a whole series of snippets that you could just do right here of just like you going back on all yours. Like, I'm not going to give my opinion. I'm going to be very.
Hand me my shovel.
Yeah.
We have to talk about your business, which you very excitedly told us about last year. Your coffee van, which you take in Tooting and deliver incredible hot coffees.
Thank you very much. Yes.
People. And delightful treats, suffered quite badly at the end of last year.
Yes.
What happened?
So essentially, my lovely vintage van, which I have told all of you probably ends up costing me a small fortune, she once again decided to have a bit of a paddy on me, and the head gasket went on her, which, simplified terms, when you hear the word head gasket, you know that that's going to be quite an expensive repair job because it is effectively within the very bowels of an engine. So you have to take all the other parts off. An actual gasket itself is not an expensive.
This is the head of all the gaskets.
Yeah, it's basically, exactly. It is the king of gaskets going on. So it's the one we all bow down to and hope nothing goes wrong. So for instance, I have throughout the years repaired various parts of the van as I've had an overheating issue for quite a long time with it. I've repaired various parts of the van to no avail, and all of that has led me to the conclusion that it is a head gasket. And then eventually at the end of November, my van started throwing out symptoms that were very much inclined towards that looks like a head gasket failure. So ordered the parts. Eventually they arrived because the nature of my van being so old and being from France, it's just, it takes a while for parts to get ordered. Managed to get the part, took the van to various garages to get quotes, knowing full well that it would be quite an expensive procedure, but at the same time, not quite being able to rally myself with just how expensive it actually was. So I decided in the end threw myself into it and decided to repair the van myself. So stripped the van effectively, stripped the engine for most of the parts, put the head gasket back on, cleaned it all up, put it back together. And where is the nearest bit of wood in here? Because I need to touch something, but I'm going to go with the paper here. Touch wood. Renee is running mechanically, at least, as well as she ever has done. So I'm feeling pretty good for 2025. I sort of tick box exercise. I've managed to turn myself into a part-time mechanic. And if all fails with my coffee van adventures, I think I'll probably try and set up an old school mechanical business fixing Renault 4s in a very niche way.
Yeah, I remember watching your videos of you undertaking all this work, and it did seem like I was watching an episode of of Auto Trader, something online, like
Scrapyard Challenge. I think is more like what I'm going for right there. So
well done, fair play for really getting stuck into it.
Yeah.
And also, this is your business, and so every day that you weren't trading is losses of income.
Yeah, I think probably, relatively speaking, I was saying this to someone earlier, the amount of time that it took for me to change the head gasket and fix it, although it wasn't a significant amount of time, I was being very careful and meticulous with it because ultimately I know that this is the bowels of an engine and I don't really want to mess it up. So I did take quite a bit of time doing it. Relatively speaking, the amount of time that I took to do it, I probably could have paid a mechanic to do it and been back out and earning that money again to make up the lost costs. But at the same time, I've managed to learn so much more about the van, mechanically speaking, and it's put me in a really good place for 2025 and just kind of, at least I feel far more confident with if other problems arise, I feel like I could actually fix them for a change. So yeah.
It's actually really interesting to state, actually, because it is so integral to your business that you actually owe it to know it inside out. I'm the same with my bike, and I've never actually taken my bike to be serviced anywhere or be repaired anywhere. I've always done it myself, because actually it can seem quite overwhelming initially, but once you kind of break down and fix little things, you eventually begin to understand the full bigger picture of it all and understand everything. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. And generally, you can work out how to do anything these days by watching YouTube or the internet giving you help. And for me, when I'm touring by bike, I need to know how to fix it in like the depths of like nowhere, because I can't rely on someone else to fix it for me. So by learning it at home, I get to know that I have the confidence wherever I am in the world to fix little things. And if it's too big to fix, then that's generally when you do need to get help. But for the most part, I want to be able to know how I can be in sync with it, so that
precisely. I think that's a really important thing, and I think it's a bit of a lost art these days. But fortunately, with my van and with your bike as well, they are ultimately quite mechanical based. They are mechanical based, so there isn't really much electronics in there. Therefore, it's a process of elimination. It is effectively going through the various tasks and ticking things off and saying, if it's not that, it's this, if it's that, it's this. And I think, especially as you said there with the bikes, it can seem daunting at the start. There are things in there which you do not understand straight away, and words being used that also mean very little to you. But just having the patience and the time to actually learn and study it makes such a difference. And I am very grateful. Well, I wouldn't say very grateful, but the experience that I had towards the end of last year, I'm grateful to have had that experience, so that I've actually managed to grow and develop and actually build a new skill set that I did not think I would ever have. So silver linings, I guess, in that respect.
So you're back trading?
Yes.
Near Tooting Common. Where exactly are you?
So we're back on the corner of Tooting Common, so Cavendish Road. So we are effectively by closest part of the park towards Balham Station.
You're actually on Google Maps.
I am, yeah.
Trailside Coffee. Find it.
Exactly. I'll be there on Google Maps. I'm even there on Uber.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uber Eats? Coffee delivery?
Actually, I haven't looked on Uber Eats.
That'd be a weird thing.
I'm not on Uber Eats, but one of my customers did get an Uber from my location. He ordered a coffee, waited at my coffee stand, and then went and got the Uber dropped, picked him up.
And you have some new treats?
I do. Lots of new bakes going on at the moment.
Tell me about them.
Okay. Well, for the last 2 years, I've effectively baked everything. I am also now I am using an external baker as well at the moment, but our selection is slowly growing, and I am building things like the in-trend things like pistachio cake. That is going down an absolute treat. White chocolate raspberry pistachio brownies, vegan and gluten-free.
Thank you. Yeah.
There we go. And then we also have, goodness me, chocolate, your classics, dark chocolate banana loaves. We have cookie. We have a whole array of things going on there. Lemon and orange polenta cake, vegan as well. So, I'm trying to cater for.
So what portion of those are you making yourself?
Nowadays, it was 50-50.
Okay.
But
this people don't understand like the hard work that goes behind you just basically being there present to sell coffee and cakes is like what you do during the day, but then you go back home and then suddenly you're then baking for the next day. Yeah,
I think there is a slight misconception that my actual trading hours are, relatively speaking, quite attractive. I finish on weekdays at least, I finish at 2 p.m. But finish at 2 p.m, you have to pack down everything, tidy, restock the van, go home, repack the van, water, all of that stuff. And then I was ultimately then baking for the day after. So that would take another hour to 2 hours of baking going on in there. And before you know it, I've also been on my feet for effectively 15 to 16 hours in the end on that day. And I decide that I'm going to go for a run or something along those lines. So it can be quite time consuming, but I wouldn't change it. It's that classic thing of when you look back on certain things, you go, my goodness, how on earth did I do that? But actually, you just will. It's very simple in that.
So you're a full-time barista, part-time mechanic, and part-time baker.
Jack of all trades, master of none going on over here. It's fine.
And a very fast runner, which we'll come to briefly in a minute. How are you going to adapt yourself in 2025 to make you more resilient against, I've known about your van for years, and it always seems like there is a story of it breaking down that seems to be part and parcel of your business. It's obviously a big part of your income. How do you help make yourself more resilient? What's the future for you in terms of building that resilience?
That is actually a very good question. And I think we briefly touched on this before on the last episode. how I mentioned that in my head, I've just seen now Renee as just an extension of myself and that she will be there for all of eternity. But ultimately, she is a 40-year-old van and she is also subject to the joys of rust. So she probably doesn't have many more years of actual commercialized work in her. So this year, there is an element where I would like to be able to put myself into a place where I could have a replacement van. And also in that same breath, a replacement van that is, I would like to say, still has the aesthetics of an older van, but with the reliability of a newer van. So I am potentially looking at doing the combination of old van, electrics inside of it, so going down the battery powered route. And I know that there are companies that can do conversions on these things, so that is one of the things which I'm looking at to potentially try and future proof myself for 2025 and beyond, but also it is about, during the downtime that I have, is to try and just work with the van to get it as reliable as possible, not just to get through the engines, but other parts of the van as well. And I think that's definitely the thing which I've learned most from last year, is that it pays to spend a bit more time and a bit more money to get a van into a place long term than it does to sort of just solve the issues that are in front of you directly. But it is also the very nature of a business that is incredibly dependent on cash flow. You pick and choose, you ride the wave, you fix that thing, something else goes. But to be honest, I'm thinking I would like a good 2025 of reliable trade going on, keeping down at the common, moving along, doing some weddings, that sort of stuff.
I've got some ideas for you to help increase your diversity in your business. To have these for free. You're a very good photographer. You clearly juggle a lot anyway in your work with, baking and mechanics and coffee and also running, but you're a very, very good photographer. You produce incredible imagery. Is there anything for the small part, how about having a little print postcard of your van that you could sell to customers?
You know what? You're the second person to have mentioned this to me over the last week, that you should start doing postcards.
Just something, you got a great image. And I think that's
not a bad shout.
The whole look and theme of your coffee business is all about kind of this kind of vintage look, and it looks very nice. You're writing this down. Wow.
Write this down.
Write this down.
You, Thomas.
Postcard.
Yep. No commission. Fantastic. Excellent.
That's one idea. The second idea is you are very well connected within the coffee world within London and all the unique coffee places. Some of other people who are like small business owners like yourself who have these unique coffee vans. How about a little book, a little coffee table book that has a collection of all the amazing, unique coffee places in London?
Oh, yes.
Something you could build over the year.
I like where your head's at in that. I would go even more niche on that, though. I would actually look at doing sort of coffee vans in particular, or street trading coffee, because there's already a fantastic coffee book out at the moment, which I adore, which is all of the London coffee scene and all the best cafes that you can go to in London. But there isn't one that is specific towards coffee traders, street trading. So I think that could be something.
Thinking about actually also the target audience on this podcast, adventure-based people, right? They want to have these are people who want books that tell them where to go on their amazing walks.
Precisely.
Here you go. You've got this combination of go for an amazing walk in London with this coffee van.
Exactly. If you're a cyclist, go for a little cruise around the parks and things, and then stop off and have yourself a coffee and a cake. Thank you, Thomas. All right.
And then you've already got your target audience. The people who come to you every day.
Yep.
You've got a little book there. Something you could sell.
We've got our YouTube audience here.
Audience. Yeah, let's try and hold on to them. Make the most of it now before they all unsubscribe. How is your running going? Last time you were on the podcast, you talked about how you were hoping for a championship place at the London Marathon, but you knew it was tight because you ran very close to the cutoff.
Yes.
What's the story going on there?
This was great, actually, because when we had this conversation, I had not yet checked to see whether or not the championship entry time had been adjusted, because there were so many people who ran such incredibly fast times at London last year. And I went back and checked on that day, and actually they have adjusted the championship entry time. So I believe it is now, you have to run sub 2:38 for a championship entry. I managed 2:39. So I do not qualify for a championship entry, which is fine. Luckily, they then reopened the good for age for those of us who effectively did not who thought that they would have qualified, but they did not qualify. And we had a small window to reapply for a good for age. So I'm doing London again. I will be once again, though, in the good for age sort of category. And I will just have to be a little bit more aware and conscious of moving towards the front of that pen rather than my rather lackadaisical sense of starting, which is often hang towards the back. There's no need to rush and get to the front and sit there for 15 to 20 minutes and get cold. But actually, I think in terms of actually running and avoiding people and not bumping into people, I would rather be nearer the front.
So what's the plan for London this year then?
So London, actually, I am not going there for a PB time this year. Yeah. But I'm still going to, I'm still not
You're still going to run it fast?
Yeah, I'm still not aiming to have it as a bit of a jolly. I would still like to run somewhere around 250. Somewhere around that.
If you run a good for age at London, does that qualify for the next London?
Yes.
Could you keep on, if you kept on running?
If you kept running good for it, yeah. If you kept, well,
so now you're in.
Provided that your good for age time, though, well, you're not guaranteed a good for age, because good for age is on the basis of there's still a set number of people you can take to London. Yeah. But
if you're well within the bracket.
If you're well within the bracket, then you'll be fine. And as a rule, I think the sort of the level now is around, I think you have to run about 255, 56 or something around that to get into the good for age, which I'm hoping I'd still be able to do.
Okay.
But no, London this year it will have an honest race, but also don't worry too much about, don't sweat it too much. We've got bigger things to come in the year. So
and what are they?
So I once again applied for Berlin Marathon, and that being considered the fastest and flattest marathon course in the world, I think, or if not in Europe. It's where I'm aiming to sort of do my marathon training block, try and get a PB there, and to go under that elusive 2:35 marathon time. So that's sort of I would consider Berlin to be like the A goal as such of the year for, again, PBs. And I'm basing all of this, by the way, on wanting to run faster times this year. As in I'm not saying this is necessarily the best thing to do. It is simply the way that I operate or want to operate this year, is to be chasing fast times and PBs and things like that. But that is the main goal. And then again, I'd love to get faster at the shorter distances, because I do think many of us running faster at shorter distances does generally improve your longer distance.
Okay.
So yeah,
I'm rooting for you as someone who is not particularly fit at the moment myself with running, and not particularly too obsessed with my own times. You know, I've been riding waves in the past where I've been pretty decent fast, but I don't do many events, so I've never really had the chance to celebrate that too much. I will be living vicariously through you and your journey.
I will be updating, Thomas. Don't you worry.
The best of luck. How are you managing your training alongside this very hectic business, which keeps you on your feet all day? And what in a typical week, how are you squeezing in your runs?
It's very much a case of, I'm very envious of everyone who manages to get out for a morning run, because that just does not exist for me by the nature of having to be up before everybody else and making coffees by 7:30, 8 o'clock for people. So I do not get the morning runs. I'm fortunate, obviously, that the days are getting lighter now. I am able to stay up for a little bit longer. And so I will be effectively finishing up, baking the cakes if I have to, and then I go out for an evening run. But it's dark at that point. So I just get my runs done in the evening. And then usually on my days off, I will do my longer runs. So fairly normal procedures in there. But if I can, I'll squeeze in a couple of sessions with friends during the week. But yeah, it's very similar to what it was last year, to be honest. You just make do with what you can. And that's just the way I've always operated.
Just jumping in briefly to say, if you've got this far, you're probably a fan of the show. And it would be great if you wouldn't mind confirming that love by following or subscribing to this podcast. It takes just one click from you, but it really does make a huge difference in getting more people to find this show. Thank you. I haven't been running much recently. Been trying to maybe try and get back into it. I had this enforced break So since the last episode, when I finished my run streak, I took some time off and had probably about 2 months when I just didn't really focus on running at all. I ran maybe once a week. But then since then, it's been a case of like, okay, you need to get back onto it. But it's been a struggle. I think the body just hasn't been able to be at a baseline where I've been able to kind of build on top of. So at the moment, I'm just in this like building the base section of my life, trying to be patient and wait for that base to fully form. And at the moment, it's not. I do some sessions and I feel like my body's just not got the strength, that I have a few niggles, which is a complete contrast to every single day when I was turning up on my run streak, where I just felt, even though I felt tired, my body just felt locked in and it had an amazing base.
Yeah.
So it's very, very bizarre. I'm just trying to enjoy the time now, but I'm kind of curious, like I do want to get back into it, but not pushing myself because I know that'll just lead to injury.
Yeah.
So I'm just doing 3 runs a week at the moment, about 30K.
You have the patience for it, though. That's the beauty, in that you understand that patience is literally one of the greatest assets that any runner can have. You know not to rush back into it, which is really
I've been
important.
here before. I think that helps.
Yeah.
I had the experience years before when coming out of an injury and having a slump, and even though my body was better, I just could not get going again. And I remember coming out of that slump, I just had to give myself patience and time and know that I will eventually rebuild. I just don't know when. So I'm very much sitting in that place now. I'm well aware that I feel a little bit like I put on a bit of weight. I'd probably, to most people look very healthy, and actually
Put on muscle, Tom. Muscle.
maybe, yeah. I don't think I've, put on that much weight, but it's definitely feels very present. And I look back at videos of myself when I was doing my run streak, and I was super skinny because I was running massive mileage every week. It just shows the power of running. Long miles is really good for weight loss.
No, I think that works. I was going to say, it's like, can we bring some controversial? Can I bring another controversial? Should we bring another controversial opinions to the table on that one?
About weight loss?
No, is it like I was just going to think of I was just trying to be stupid, and the idea of you being like, and the greatest thing for weight loss was always going to be the vegan diet.
Last episode, I said this thing. No, I mean, it's clearly something that works for me. Cardio has been something that has kept me at bay. I think the problem is when you run big mileage, you eat heavily, and when you stop doing that big mileage, you still eat heavily. So I'm eating a runner's diet, but I'm not training like a runner. And I think that a lot of people have that problem when they kind of come out of running. But I also know that running is not my identity, and it's a part of my identity, but there's other things. In the summer, I enjoy going cycling. At the moment, I'm doing my writing challenge, and that is taking a lot of my time and energy. Work is also very important to me. I do notice, though, that spending time long on edits means that I don't have the time to go out for runs and don't feel as fresh and able to run. And sitting down doing editing is not very healthy. I do have a standing desk, but I don't always use it to stand. So everything's in balance, I think, and just trying to work out how I can rebuild.
Now, you've mentioned it briefly there, but I thought it might be an opportune moment here to segue into how things are going, though, with your writing challenge.
Okay.
How's that all coming along?
So this is my winter writing challenge that I committed to doing when the clocks turn back in October, and when they spring forward in spring, I will stop. And I committed to doing 2 pages of paper, front and back, so 4 pages, every day for those 6 months. Last time we spoke was day 1 of the writing challenge, and I had written 1 day's worth of work. I've got my folder here of all my writing. Let me bring it out.
He's getting up off the desk, people here, and he's producing a fantastic A4 binder full.
So I shared with you 2 double-sided pieces of paper on day 1. Since then, I haven't written today. I'll do that after you leave. This is
Meaty. That's what that is.
84 days worth of writing. 2 pages, front and back. So basically 4 pages a day. So 84, let me do some maths. 84 times 4, 336 pages of writing. Do you want to take a look at it? I have not yet digitized this. So I am very conscious that should there be a fire or a water leak or I just lose it traveling.
Though, isn't it? This is a good effort right here. I like it. I mean, I'm not going to read any of this yet.
Oh, feel free to read it. It's all gobbledygook anyway.
I know, but at the same time,
that was the first page you wrote. So just pick
this
something
was the
in the middle.
one, wasn't it?
Yeah, pick something in the middle, and just You feel free to read it out loud. Like, I'll tell you if it's bad.
Day 28. This also requires me to read your handwriting here, Tom. So built early on in the race for him to... Okay, so I've missed a page.
I probably... So basically, I don't finish a story. So I write my 4 pages of paper. Yeah. And even if I'm mid-story, I stop.
Okay, yeah.
So I pick it up the next day.
Well, this was very much confusing me right here because I didn't want to mention it, but the first word, built early, and I was like, the built isn't even... You haven't even put it capitalized. So there's clearly something missing here, but it says... Built early on in the race for him to slip in at a 2:58, which was a mighty effort and should give him a good for age time to qualify for London Marathon the following year. He's just talking about me. Oh no. So my official time? Well, it wasn't under 3 hours. I knew that for sure. I'd given up on that dream in the last 5 miles, but my chip time came in at, guess everybody, I'll tell you, 3:04:43.
Oh, that's actually a good page.
A really good thing to write. Well done. You did 3:04:43 as well.
So that particular day of writing is about my first ever marathon, which I did on my run streak. So it's an incredible story I've got to tell about that. You've kind of come to the very end and not talked about not seen like the actual hardship I faced along the way. But that is an interesting story to choose because I've probably written a fair few pages about that particular day of running. So some days I only write a few lines. If nothing really happened, I was like, okay, I ran around the block 2 kilometers at this pace, and that's my day. And I go on to another day. And so I've basically been writing about 1,001 days of running, which is my run streak. I've got a list of all my GPS data. Every single entry is a different day. Every day I write, I go through my list and I bring up the days that I need to write about. Some days I don't write much about it, but other days I will focus and write several pages on that particular day of running. And that particular day of running was my first ever marathon. So I have a lot to say about that experience. You caught the very end of it.
And an incredibly impressive time as well, a 3:04.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's giving away a bit of a spoiler for the book.
I am so sorry.
But I have noticed actually how much of a kind of drag it's been on my life, knowing that I have to sit down and I write for typically an hour. It's usually a little bit longer, and I started off this in the first month writing very late, sometimes at like 11 o'clock at night, 'cause that's sometimes the only time I could fit it in. I've got better at that, and now I'm writing in the daylight, which is nicer. But it's surprising how even sitting down to write for an hour takes a lot of energy out of me. And it's now become part of my working day. And I do find it hard to sometimes separate from that and then go and do some editing for the podcast or go and do shoots, for instance, and do some other work. There are times when I've had to fit it in, like when I've been like on a bus or on a train, because I've had such a busy day. But I've made sure I've got it done. I would say I chose to do 4 pages of paper a day, 2 sides double front and back. I thought that's what I did last year. And actually, I think last year I did only 1 piece of paper front and back, so 2 pages a day, where that was actually quite nice. And now this is kind of like quite laborious because once I've written like 1 paper, it's like taking me sometimes an hour just to do that. And then I'm like, I've got to do it again. And when I'm struggling to focus and I'm very tired, it's like, this is actually taking quite a long time. But I'm doing double the amount of work than I was doing last year. And out of my 1,001 days of writing, I've written about 777 of them. So I'm very close to writing the very end of my journey, which probably will be maybe another week or two of time for me to do. I've still got, in my 6th month writing challenge, an extra 3 months to do after that. So I'll have to work out what I work on, whether it's rewriting this book, which they'll have to go through a massive second pass of rewriting, or whether I'll focus on a different creative venture altogether, which I have a few ideas for other things. Who knows? I'll work that out at the time.
Volume 2.
Well, it'll be a creative project number 2. It'll be a second project, which I really shouldn't take on a second one when I haven't finished this one. But I think the focus is to spend that time, an hour or so a day, just free writing on something which is building something that's going to be part of a bigger creative project. So this is going to be a book, and I'll have to digitize this, which will take me some time before I can then start re-editing it. And so whether that just becomes extra part of my time in my day, that I have to spend an hour a day digitizing it, maybe verbalizing it to Google Docs or something so it can be typed up, that's going to take quite a long time. I'm going to worry about that later. But at the moment, I need to be with a blank piece of paper every day, writing something that is going to form a bigger part of a creative project.
With that in mind, what's been your biggest surprise about doing this project? Because I think in certain aspects, there was an element when you started doing it that would almost be there's a slightly romanticized notion that it's like you get the free flowing, this monologue, and you would just have this stream of consciousness and it would be easy and it would just happen. But I remember you posting, as you've already mentioned at the start, you were squeezing in the time when you couldn't. It was usually horribly late in the evening, and you obviously have become slightly better at it. But have you found that the expectations versus the realities, how's that weighed up for you? Well,
just to note, because I'm writing a piece of non-fiction, I have lived all these stories. So when I pick my GPS data from my Google spreadsheet that's got a run, generally I can know what I want to write about from looking at that data. And sometimes it's nothing I don't have to write about, but other times, like the Brighton Marathon, there's a lot I can talk about. So in terms of finding that flow for what to write, I've lived those stories, so that kind of comes quite easily. It's just whether or not I'm in a great headspace to actually physically do that. If I'm very tired, if I've been very busy, I can be very distracted. So sometimes it doesn't flow as good as it can be. But I don't have writer's block to some extent because I know what I'm writing about. If I was doing a form of fiction where I'm working out where these characters go and I don't quite know, and I'm having to find it in that flow, that would be different. And that might be something I do in the last 6 months. I would say the biggest surprise is I had this romanticized vision of myself sitting on the sofa in the evening, on a Sunday evening when I'm home, just sticking the fireplace on YouTube, on the TV, having some like gentle jazz music in, and then just writing for hours. And that's what I did last winter, but I was writing less per day. So when I could find that time to write more, I really enjoyed it. But this year, I'm writing more per day as a minimum, and I'm finding that is quite exhaustive. So I don't have the time or energy to be like, oh, actually, I'll sit for 3 hours and write, because I'm writing for an hour every day. So it's almost like, well, that is what I do. That is building this book gently over time. And there's other things I have to do in my life. So I'm not going to sit down and just write for an extra hour. There's been times when I've wrote in the mornings, like, oh, maybe I'll do an extra hour in the evening, but I haven't. Maybe I'll still do that. I've just been very busy with life. I do like the idea of having more evenings in when I can just write for, not a set amount of time and just until I feel like I've exhausted myself. But I've been building every day with the 4 pages, and that seems to be the remarkable thing. And as you've seen from the sheer amount of these 336 pieces of size of paper that I've written, what can be built if you just commit to a goal day by day.
I think that's a really lovely thing to say, actually. And I'm very excited to have a read of it once you've finalized it, given it the first look over and things like that. I think it's a fantastic thing to set out and to actually do. And the fact that you've pretty much achieved it is fantastic. I think it's a lovely goal to have had, and a lovely thing to look forward to for later in the year, I guess.
I would say don't be fooled by the sheer number of paper that I've written on, because a lot of this won't make the book. Some of it is gobbledygook. A lot of it will have to be rewritten. I call this like data collection. This is like getting everything that's in my mind onto paper, and it's quite formulaic. It's like this happened, this happened, this happened, this happens. And clearly I'm focusing on something that I think is quite an exciting story, but I haven't shaped it yet to be exciting. It's just about getting everything that's in my mind on paper. And so the next pass of this will be about working out which stories I want to keep, which stories I want to take away, and then how I can sculpt those stories to be really exciting forms of literature that read really well, and where I can tell a story in one page rather than 4, to make it more succinct. And
yeah.
So that will be the hard part. Another surprising thing actually is how on a regular day-to-day, I really struggled to focus. Over Christmas, I was hosting friends, and I wondered how I would squeeze in my 4 pages of paper of writing a day. And I wrote the fastest in those few days when I literally couldn't be away from my friends for too long because I was hosting. I sat down and I was like, let's just get this done. I think my fastest was like 36 to 40 minutes or something to get these 4 pieces of paper out. I haven't found that flow since.
Yeah.
There's something about having like some kind of deadline or something that forces you. On a normal day, I wake up and then I'm like, oh, let me just check this thing online. And that's human. And I've been honest about sometimes how much I get distracted. But
well, I think that's it, though, isn't it? It's the fact that when we are ultimately given so much choice, we often, for a lot of the time, we make bad choices or choices that aren't particularly conducive to our well-being and our health and things. It's like no different than when you scroll through your Netflix or something. More often than not, I'm going to choose a film that's not particularly great over a film that has won Oscars and BAFTAs and things like that. And it's not too dissimilar when it comes to things like your writing and giving yourself, you've only got that one opportunity to do it. You have to focus and do it on that time. Otherwise, you won't do it. But if you've got the opportunity to do it elsewhere during the day, you would just go, I'll think about it, do it later.
I wonder whether, now that I've been living it, and I do find that it's quite a daily grind, whether or not in the future, if I did this again, to give myself weekends off. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think sometimes about having this daily commitment means that it just becomes part of your habit. But it's made me wonder, going forward, once in spring and summer, should I try, maybe not committing for like a daily habit, but should I just say, I'm going to try every day to do 1 piece of paper and just continue it forward, knowing that maybe only 3 or 4 days a week I might do that, but just still having that kind of, still something I want to say, still something I want to build. I'm going to be more busy over the summer, but I still want to sit down and do this. Much like my kind of commitment to doing yoga every day, I have this weird commitment where like I try to do yoga every day, but I don't. And I end up doing it maybe 3 or 4 times a week on the good weeks. And it's just like, I want to try and wake up and just do yoga, but sometimes I don't. So maybe it's like in the summer, I'm going to wake up and do my 1-page piece of paper. And even if I just write on one side, it's just something. So maybe I'll continue that as well.
I think it's a good goal to set yourself to keep it up. And as you say, if it can help form a good habit, why not? I like this. I like the goals. I like the challenges that you've set yourself. I think it's really interesting for your listeners and things to hear. And likewise, I think when it comes to sort of, I wouldn't call it challenges, but things that you've set this task and you've stuck with it, and it's hopefully now nearly a part of you, and that's how you are. You're also coming up to something else, I believe, this year, which is also something which you did, and now it's entirely a part of you, and that's being sober for a certain amount of time. Is that right?
Yeah, coming up to 10 years, which is quite remarkable looking back on a decision I made, nearly 10 years ago to temporarily give up drinking, which was purely just on the basis of me training for a long swim that I was doing. A friend of mine wanted me to do the Dart 10K, which is the 10K swim down the River Dart in Devon. And I remember at the time in my life when I was being a busy freelancer in East London, I was working a lot. I was exercising a lot by running. And I wouldn't say drinking a lot, but I was drinking. And I always remember having like the snivels. I never really felt like I was on top of my health. And then suddenly I had this 3-month training plan to get me fit to do the 10K swim, where I would be in a pool, in a cold pool for 3 or 4 times a week. And the thought of doing that when I had like the sniffles, I was like, this doesn't seem like I could sustain this. And I was like, well, I can't give up working and I can't give up the exercise. That's obviously the most important part of this journey for me. Let's just give up alcohol for the time being and see if that fixes my health. So I just completely went, cold turkey and complete sober for 3 months. And I came out of those 3 months and I swam the Dart 10K, a fantastic event. And I was like, I'll just see where this life can lead me for the time being. I'll continue it and see. I never shut the door on alcohol completely. It was always a case of, if I feel like I need a drink, I will, but I'll just see if I can keep sober. I never thought I'd be someone who would be sober. I was just like, let's just not drink for a while and see where we go.
I really like that because I think your story is one which is incredibly relatable and it's devoid of judgmentalism over alcohol itself, which we all know, relatively speaking, the health benefits of alcohol aren't particularly great as such, but there are other aspects of alcohol that people seem to like and prefer and things. But yours isn't through there was like some profound moment that made you go, it needs to change my life as such. Yours is just simply a product of, as you say, you got some training. Do you need it in your life? Like, well, not against it, but also I'm okay without it for the time being. And I think you can't underestimate that as an actual story really versus a lot of other things that we see out there. Yeah.
And we are in January at the moment, which is a common trend for people to, give up drinking for this month, which always comes off the back of like the biggest hangover ever on New Year's Eve.
I had a couple of questions for you. And some of these are general and some are sort of in the slightly more granular thing. Firstly, there was a classic, do you miss elements of drinking? Or did you? Because 10 years is a long time.
Yeah. I think initially, and still today actually, there's no replication for the sipping of a fresh cold beer at the end of a hard day's work. And even though non-alcoholic beers have come on leaps and bounds and they are in a really good place today, initially when that wasn't the case, there wasn't really something for me that could be like, oh, I just really want that beer. And full transparency, even though I went sober, I still did dabble with the occasional drink. But when I say occasional, it's very occasionally. I would, once in a blue moon, just be like, I'll just have a drink and see what it feels like. And every single time I had that drink, it would just be like one beer. I just felt a bit icky the next morning. And it was a reminder like, yeah, no, this isn't for me.
It's not for you. Yeah. I really like that.
And that was something that I actually felt when I was drinking. I just didn't really have a good relationship with the casual drinking. And that sounds like I was like an alcoholic or something. But like I was in a circle of friends at the time in a shared creative studio in Dalston where at least once or twice a week they'd go to the pub after work. And so that was basically what I did. This is before I found running communities, before I realized you can actually go and exercise with friends. I went to the pub with friends, so we'd have like a pint or two, and I just never enjoyed like going for like 2 pints on a Wednesday evening. It just didn't really feel like that was me, but that was just who I was surrounded with, and that's just what I did. And it just felt weird to go to the pub and not drink with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was like, oh, let's get some chips instead and like spend my money doing that. But it was once I was freed from that I was able to understand how I could still go to the pub and not drink. And there was a very crucial element in this story when after the 3 months when I returned to my normal life and I could allow myself to drink if I wanted to, but I chose not to, I went to a friend's wedding, which was probably the first kind of serious wedding I went to as like a young adult with lots of friends that were going to be there. And I was very apprehensive about it. And I remember thinking, I'm going to try and go sober, but at the wedding, if I feel like I need to drink to enjoy it, I will. And, you know, typically a British wedding is all about drinking. And I remember going to this wedding, be like, okay, I'm going to go sober. And if I need to drink, I will, but I'll see what happens there. I'll just go with the flow. And I got there and they had like a live band going on, which was like an amazing little like like funk band. And it just got, and because I was surrounded by so many good friends and hearing this amazing music just got me into the groove. And for the first time in my adult life, I voluntarily moved my way to the dance floor on my own because I just was feeling great. Yeah. And this was stone cold sober. This was a complete contrast to the person I was before, where I'd feel like I'd need like 3 or 4 drinks before I could make my way to the dance floor. And that particular moment made me realize like, oh, it's not alcohol that I need. That's not what's going to give me a good time. It is the surroundings. It is where you are. It is who you're with. It's the good times that you can have with people or where you choose to be. And it made me remember that there are times when I wouldn't feel great and I would try to drink to make myself feel better, to make myself feel drunk, and I would never get drunk. And I never understood why I just couldn't get drunk. I would keep on drinking and drinking. And I was like, why am I getting drunk and enjoying tonight? It's because I was in a bad place. And that alcohol was not actually helping me get there. The times when you feel great with alcohol is when you're already in a good place. It's because you're with amazing friends or in your favorite location, your favorite pub or something, in a really good pub. You're already in that place and the alcohol just elevates you to be somewhere even better. But you don't maybe realize that at the time and you think it's the alcohol. And as soon as I understood that, it unlocked something in my mind. I was like, hang on, if I am not having a good time in a place, so let's say I wasn't having a good time at this wedding and I was like, well, I need to drink. It made me realize, no, it's not the drink. If I'm not having a good time, I need to work out, one, how I can make myself have a good time. What can I change about my mindset? Or just remove myself from that situation and be like, okay, I'm not having a good time here. It's not for me. I don't have to be here. I can do something else. I'm not going to resort to alcohol to try and fix that problem. So since then, I've just learned that I need to make sure I can be the best version of myself first. And there are things in my mindset I can change on how I can have a good time in life. And I don't need alcohol to do that for me.
I like it.
A lot to unpack there.
It is, but it's also, it's not. It's like, I think your process has been very natural, and it's also a case of you recognize that you had to remove the veil of boozing as like that, because you're talking there about you would never go to the floor without having a drink beforehand, or the dance floor or anything like that. But actually it demonstrates that you had clearly gone through a phase of where you thought that the alcohol was what you needed. And now then you found effectively, or developed, a sense of confidence that came without having alcohol. Because I think so much of that, it's why would you go up to somebody, why would you go up to a stranger randomly when you're sober or something like if you were there on a night out, it's like people go and they have you need liquid courage, don't you? So you have a drink so that it's hopefully just makes you more lucid and you're able to have better conversation. But you realize that a lot of the time it's purely a confidence issue. And once you've got beyond that and you realize that actually, though alcohol is an agent for many things, it's not necessarily for that. You must just open your world and mind to a whole new, like to sort of not endless possibilities, but simply it's a case of you can go to all these social events that have always predominantly been centered, or in some way alcohol is a large part of it. And you can go to all those social events and still actually be just as in tune with everybody else, and everybody else equally being just as in tune with you, and it all kind of being, just being a wonderful experience. And I think that's something to be said for that, really.
Yeah. It can be a bit funny when you're with people who do drink, because if they continue drinking throughout the night, there becomes a point at the night when suddenly they start slurring their words. And that's usually a point where it's like, okay, now I need to leave because this isn't fun for me. And you're probably not going to remember me not being here anymore. So now's the time when I think I can leave. But it does strike me that I no longer, when I'm out and about, I no longer have any kind of anxiety of like, oh, do I need to drink or not? That just hasn't struck my mind for years now. And I feel like I'm in a really good place with that. And since then, obviously, like non-alcoholic drinks now are just sweeping the world by storm. And there seems to be a trend now within people like choosing not to drink, whether that's just temporarily for like a training plan or something, or just now actually lots of people are dabbling with the sober life.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. Yeah. I wanted to ask you actually how you felt about the changing of attitude, like how attitudes have changed over the years, because I think you probably been sober during what I would consider to be the greatest change in attitudes for around alcohol and boozing and either drinking culture or just in general, really.
Yeah, it's quite refreshing to see now more and more people are accepting of it, which probably wasn't the case 10 years ago. And I hold my hands up and say that I was someone who just didn't accept someone being sober as well, because we are British and our culture and society is just founded on drinking. And it's actually heartbreaking to admit that like so much of what we have come to accept as normal is like this drinking culture, that when we meet someone who's sober, or at least maybe 10 years ago, it was a bit like, but why? And I had a friend and I remember asking them, oh, what about just like having a drink with a meal? Like, why don't you enjoy some wine? Like, and I just couldn't come to terms with that at that time in my life. Yeah. So I can see that, it can be quite polarizing to some people, because drinking is a huge part of our life. I would say one thing, which I think I've been really impressed by, 10 years ago, it was probably still accepted that some form of alcohol was part of a healthy lifestyle. That just seemed to be the norm. Like, oh yeah, but alcohol's healthy, in moderation. Wine is healthy. That's a good part.
Glass of red wine a day keeps cancer away.
That's a healthy part of a lifestyle. Now, 10 years later, it's fully accepted by the scientific community that we don't need any alcohol to have a healthy lifestyle. And actually, alcohol is not healthy for us in any way, even in moderation.
We should put that to our dietitian friend.
I would say one thing that really stands out as a real inflection point to changing my attitude completely to alcohol, even though I was already living this lifestyle, was during COVID. And everyone should remember what we used to wash our hands with was antibacterial alcohol gels. We used alcohol to kill stuff on our hands, and we're putting that into our body. So that was a real eye-opener to be like, But
you're killing all the bad stuff in there though, Tom. Clearly, that's how it works, right?
Bit of Donald Trumpism there, yeah. Drink the alcohol, I'll get rid of COVID. And that was like, hang on, we've washed our hands with alcohol. Why are we putting it in our bodies? So that's now my viewpoint. It's like, I'm really, really happy. Even though I never shut the door on it completely, I think the door is now well and truly shut on it in my life. I will say though, I do like the idea of one time in my life, whenever I feel like I need to like maybe fully celebrate some massive achievement, which might be some future dream of mine, just going on the world's biggest bender. just like, and then be like, I didn't shut the door on it completely, by the way, this is my one day. I want to go an absolute bender.
Tell you what, Tom, if we get 10 subscribers going on to, we get 10 subscribers, you and I, we're going out, we're going to have half a pint.
Half a pint, wow. I also fully respect people's right to drink and enjoy alcohol as part of a healthy lifestyle, which you're more than welcome to. I'm certainly not judging anyone, but I hope to maybe inspire people with my own story for anyone who's curious to live a sober life or work out maybe something that's going on in their life which they maybe need to work on, which they are covering up with alcohol. Like, who knows? I want to talk about the podcast, which seems to be in a really good place at the moment. Been very busy since coming back from my summer jaunts last year. We put some good episodes out since our conversation, and I've done some more recordings, and hopefully there's some other recordings in the future as well. So it seems like there is at least, a good few months of content that's going to be going out there, which always is a bit of a gentle bit of anxiety within these, like how am I going to get guests and content? But let's talk about people I've released. Fiona English, who talked about pregnancy deferrals. A fantastic episode. She was great. She really does know her stuff. And I know a few people who actually have listened to her episode and then met her at like an event and be like, oh, you're the girl from the podcast. And it's like this like almost like famous person that they've like been like, oh my God, you're someone who's I've just listened to, which is fantastic. And that's great that people are listening and engaging with it. And Fiona's a big part of the running community in London. So you can find her. In fact, actually I was at a Thursday Adidas session the other week and someone was like, oh, I listened to this episode with this girl who's talking about pregnancy deferrals. I was like, yeah, she's just there. And I'm like, oh my God, she's there. Oh, this is the lovely part of the podcast that I'm kind of fusing in like the people that I already know within like the world of running and adventure. And they are people that are hugely accessible to people as well within London. A bit of an update on that story. Tokyo Marathon now has pregnancy deferrals. I'd like to think it's part of, because of the podcast conversation we put out, but it's definitely not. But well done for Fiona and the rest of the women and men who have been championing for that change to happen. I think that's now the last of the majors to have like fallen and given up and said, actually, yes, we need pregnancy deferrals for our runners. I also had Pete Cooper from Cooper Runs, which I really enjoyed my conversation with him. I think that's a really good example of why I choose to do these long form conversations. And I think they're not for everyone. Like going into 2-hour conversation might not be for you, and also not every episode of 2 hours is going to be for you, but the ones that are, then I hope you get something really deep out of it. And Pete's, I think, was a really good example of the importance of having that second hour. Because I think with a lot of guests, they clearly have their story and they're used to telling, this certain like they've got these certain lines about their life that they want to get out, and they're used to saying it.
They know the highlights.
But once they've got rid of all that then exposes them to have to kind of go a bit deeper. And I never know where a conversation is going to go. It's very organic. I have a rough outline, but in the conversation with Pete, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who's not listened. So choose not to listen to this next bit now. But he admitted from someone who suffered from suicidal thoughts that he still had them, and he's got a heart condition. And he said in mid conversation, he was like, and sometimes when I go for a run, I just think about pushing myself and ending it all. And it took me a good minute or two to really process what was happening in what he was saying. And I picked him up on this, and I didn't let it kind of slip. And I was like, okay, hang on, can we just talk about this? And are you saying what I think you're saying is that you sometimes still today think about ending your life, even though you've gone through so much kind of therapy? And it was a really kind of quite moving part of our conversation when he was able to explain what was going on in his mind. And even though he would suffer with suicidal thoughts, he had a really good tool belt in how to deal with that. But it's about acknowledging the fact that he still had them. And that was okay, because he was in a good place on how to work with it. And that conversation went on a bit of a turn, and we talked about that for the next kind of 10 or 15 minutes. And I opened up about my own experiences with that kind of same thought process. But that there's this, I've listened to a few podcasts that he's been on, and a lot of people kind of don't really kind of go into some of the details. And I think the beauty of what I can do is I can pick up on something where if it feels right, we can go a bit deeper into some of the topics, which is what we did with that one. And I also really liked his kind of mentality, is that you don't, because he's got a heart condition, he's not chasing these like super fast times. He can't push himself to the maximum that, you know, perhaps someone like yourself or myself can do. And so I think he appealed to like the kind of everyday runner kind of thing. And I love that about his stories. Like, just because you see other people obsessed in their own like journey of running, you shouldn't let that put you off. If all you want to do is just run marathons for the sake of running marathons and you're not obsessed about time, then that's okay. And I love that part of his story. A great reminder that just running, it should just be about running.
Yeah, doesn't have to have an end goal.
And you shouldn't really be comparing yourself to others and whatever journey they are on. Just shouldn't let that affect the joy that you can get from it as well. And then today, maybe this episode will come out straight after Deo's, but Deo Kato is the first person to have ran the length of Cape Town to London, crossing 2 continents. And I had him on to talk about his phenomenal achievement and the deeper story behind why he chose to run that distance between those 2 places. And that episode is something I'm very proud of. Deo is a close friend of mine. But I really, I do a lot of work in like prepping for these conversations, and then the conversations themselves are quite organic and I don't know where they're going to go. And then I get to see it all again in the edit. And Deo's is a really good example of how I was able to understand the conversation so much more once I got it into the edit. And I think maybe it's because I can then listen to it as a listener as opposed to having to be the kind of the host. And he talks about how his journey is about telling the history of human migration, that all humans came from Africa and we migrated. This is millions of years ago. We migrated from Africa to the rest of the world. And the story of him facing racial abuse as he came over to the UK and people telling him to go back to where he came from. And he was doing this run to remind people that we all came from the same place. We are all human, but also, you know, we all did come from the continent of Africa. That is scientifically now accepted. But I mean, that was one part of his journey. And then the second part of his journey, that was what the story he wanted to tell. But the second part of his journey was the stories he didn't know he would be able to tell until he did his journey. And that is about the very current issue of migration. And he went on his own migration journey, physically traveling by foot from Cape Town in South Africa, through the continent of Africa, and then through Europe. And the journey he went through Europe was from Greece, which is a very current migration journey from a lot of migrants coming to Europe and traveling to European countries. And day by day, and he talked about this, he would end up every day in a different place, in a foreign place, not knowing what was going on. And he talked about how he sometimes faced hostility from people that he came across, but also he faced incredible goodwill from people who gave him hospitality and welcomed him into his homes. And it made me realize that he was actually doing a migration journey and living the journey like a migrant, like being in a new place, being in a foreign place that you had to call home, even if it was just temporarily for that one night. And it seemed like there were 2 options that people could, or 2 reactions people could give him. And one was to give him hostility, and the other one was to give him the goodwill and hospitality. And it made me realize how important it is to support migrants who are in a place which they don't have as their home. They have not chosen to be here. They've arrived here through fleeing their home, perhaps because of war or persecution or through climate change. They're not willingly here by choice. And with so much disparity in the media of hostility towards migrants, Deo's journey was a reminder of how important it is to talk to these individuals, to learn their story and to do your very best to welcome them and see what you could offer them to help them settle or learn more about life, because you don't understand the story that they have gone through to get there. And in the face of, giving someone either hostility or goodwill, what would you like to receive if you were going on that same journey? And it brought highlights to my own cycle ride through Europe, where I'm a white British person cycling through Europe, so it wasn't that bad, but I also arrived at foreign places where I didn't speak the language and I felt out of place. I didn't know what was going on. And the times when my day was brightened was when I found someone to have good conversation with, or who could give me some kind of hospitality, or someone gave me 10 euros once at a bus station because they knew the struggles I had every day and they just wanted to support that. And I think in the edit, I really understood more now about the importance of his journey and the stories he was able to tell about being a migrant, not only from his own journey from coming over from Uganda when he was a child, but also now going on this journey and passing through foreign lands as a migrant and experiencing, these two different opposing viewpoints from people along the way. I hope people...
I'm looking forward to, like I said, I'm really looking forward to actually listening to that one, because it's a story which interests me anyway. Running across all of Africa and into Europe is fantastic, and also did follow his Instagram and his social media and stuff, and so that there is that interest in there as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that and hearing what you gleaned from him before he blows up and becomes massive, and then
it's very common that a lot of people go on journeys and do these incredible physical achievements, right? But it's usually the reason why they do it, which is kind of, what is I'm more interested in. It's why are you doing this? What's the bigger story? And with Deo, it's so much more profound, and you can only really understand it by listening to him talk about it. And he pairs in his own personal experience of being a migrant coming over from Uganda, his mom's experience, and then also he's been on this journey where he has encountered experiences which other migrants do. So being jailed for 3 weeks in South Sudan was something that other people who are basically on their own migrant journey through Africa are doing. And he was lucky enough, because he's on a British passport and he had the British embassy behind him, that he was able to be released once people found out where he was. But there's other people, these forgotten stories of other migrants who pass through lands and they're fleeing war. They're fleeing war in parts of Africa, which we don't hear much about. And they're typically going from another country to another neighboring country. But even Africans traveling through Africa is not as easy as you might assume. And we talk and go into detail about that. And he even faced a lot of adversity, even though he's an African traveling through Africa. These are things which, because he has witnessed and endured and he's seen firsthand, it's going to make his next chapter of his life so incredibly profound now, what he can able to do and the experience he's had. And he's referenced Martin Luther King as one of his kind of influences, who came about from the Alabama bus boycott, which is where he created his 381 days of running for justice. And it's clear that Martin Luther King is a big inspiration to him. And I think Deo is very much a modern day version of Martin Luther King. So it's someone who I'm really excited to follow going forward, even though he's a close friend, but I know that he's going to be doing great things, and I really want to help support him as much as I can in getting his messaging out there to as many people as possible. And the podcast is one of them. So yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing more of that.
I did my first ever compilation episode over Christmas. Put out the top 10 episodes of all time, which I think was, I don't know if that was a good idea or not, whether to do a best of 2024 or not, but the podcast has not only been going for 18 months. And it just felt right to say, if I'm going to do a compilation, then maybe the ones that, people have been listening to the most is good to highlight, because they clearly got something in them. So, top 10, James Holt made it in there.
I know.
Friend of ours, which was the first ever recording, and I'm incredibly proud that the first ever recording was, something that people have, returned to again and again to listen to. I didn't know what I was doing back then, and the conversations have evolved since, and they're still evolving. But it's great that kind of came in there. I don't want to spoil it to anyone if people haven't listened and don't want to know what the number one is, but I'm now going to reveal the number one. Another close friend of ours.
It's going to have to be
Anna Jackson. Brilliant. I mean, I'd say it's surprising, but it's not really when you kind of know, how she's able to communicate ideas is fantastic. She's a brilliant communicator. She's also another person who I wonder, wonder what she'll be doing in the future. Like, I feel like I
think her story is a perfect story to follow and see, especially within the industry that she works in as well, amongst other things, like amongst her whole life as well. But the industry is evolving at a rapid pace. And also it's so incredibly important to all of us. It's tangible as well. We can literally see it and feel it and everything else. So I think what she does, her story as well, obviously you went and talked about her background as well, from obviously being here in London and then obviously moving back out to the countryside. But I think you should do, I think if anything, we're going to plug this so that we can get Anna Jackson back on. Come on, Anna.
Well, I think perhaps the experience through the podcast, but also through the documentary 6 Inches of Sword, I think she was able to realize that she could have a voice, and maybe she's trying to work out how that could be utilized in the future of regenerative farming in the UK. So, watch this space. And, if anyone wants to go and listen to that episode, it is the top listened to episode on Spotify. So, there's a reason for that, and you'll find that out if you haven't already listened to it. Coming up on the podcast, I've done 2 other recordings, I think. 3 other recordings I've got in the bank, actually. One of them, Nick Bester, someone we both know, on his incredible sub 220 marathon story. There's been no person on the internet who's needed a time in a marathon much more than Nick Bester. It's been something that's transcended years of time as he on his quest to get to sub 220. And as soon as he achieved that last year at Berlin,
that's a bit of a spoiler alert, isn't it?
I had to invite him in to tell that story. He's great. I'm looking forward to publishing that soon. And then actually this week I recorded an episode, or last week I recorded an episode with a guy called Charlie Wild, who is one half of the Travel Project, who are, I guess they're kind of like social media people. They have a really popular Instagram page where they profile great adventures within the UK. So I got him on to talk about his story. He gives a lot of great advice about traveling and adventuring in the UK, which I think is fantastic. And it's almost like this podcast was built for someone like himself and his wife, Jess. So really happy, really looking forward to share that soon in the next month or so. Okay, let's move on. You are our resident coffee expert on this channel, and it would be rude for me not to ask you for some kind of coffee advice before you depart and go elsewhere for another few months.
Yeah.
What would you like to talk about in the world of coffee today?
Okay, so I had a little one that I wanted to talk about, and it's essentially a little bit of myth busting going on here, and it's the concept that fresh is best. So freshly ground coffee, everyone will tell you, or for the most part, most people will say that freshly ground coffee is always the best, and that if you've ground your coffee and you've left it for a while, it just loses those flavors, the aromas and things.
Yeah, you're talking about grinding it like immediately and then brewing it.
Precisely.
So it's like got minutes.
Exactly. So freshly ground coffee, you've ground it and then you put it into your mocha pot, your espresso machine, whatever. The aromas, the flavors from that are essentially it is as fresh as it can possibly be. Therefore, it must be the best.
It must be, right?
It must be.
Yeah, no, it must be.
It must be. And the whole point of this is not to dispute the fact that freshness is good. It's nice to have, but to address the fact that people think that if you grind your coffee and you leave it, it will be terrible. Effectively, I want to address how you can still have an incredible cup of coffee with pre-ground coffee or coffee that was ground and left for weeks on end, and it could still taste almost just as good, if not as good, as a freshly ground brew. And so I want to sort of address this and how you can do this.
Is that really true? Could you leave it for a couple of weeks and it could still taste great?
So recently there's been a couple of tests with Q graders who are effectively, they have the best tasting flavor profiles. They are qualified professionals when it comes to tasting coffee. And there was a blind taste test where 2 coffees were freshly ground, so all the same coffees, all ground the same way, etc. But 2 were freshly ground, and another one was not just days old, it was 8 weeks old, so nearly 2 months old. And there were 6 of these Q graders. Only 50% could tell which one was effectively pre-ground from 8 weeks ago. And even then, the difference wasn't to say that they thought the pre-ground was worse. It was simply you could notice that there was just a very subtle difference in taste. And to go further on this, what I'm trying to say is that there are elements here though that need to be addressed, and it is if you do have pre-ground coffee, you have to store it properly. For instance, if you were to grind your coffee and leave it out in a bag on the side in your house, that will oxidize and that will become stale. It will have that rather sort of like metallic taste to it, and it will lose all those wonderful flavors and aromas. However, storing your pre-ground coffee properly will hold on to its flavor profiles far better.
Okay, so how do we store it properly at home?
Perfect. So for everyone who's at home, if you have a tin, this is what the best way of storing it. You can now obviously buy certain products which are effectively vacuum sealers. But once you've ground your coffee, you want to put it into as small a container as possible. And you want to then seal it up and make sure that effectively there isn't as much oxygen in there, because coffee reacts with oxygen, it oxidizes, and that's what often helps or enhances the bitterness and those horrible flavor profiles that you often taste. So once you've pre-ground, you want to put it into a smaller container, not a big container, because if you put it into a big container, the particles that are within the coffee, those flavors that you smell, they effectively want to move from high density places, i.e. the coffee, into a lower density place, hence the air. So you want to sort of create a vacuum and make it as condensed as possible so it can keep all those flavors within a certain space. So you want to put it into a small container. If you can, certain products now, which are storage containers, they often have a little vacuum on them, so you can often twist them and it removes the air from it. If you can get your hands on one of those, fantastic. If you can't, no problem. But for instance, if you have an aluminium tin, a metallic tin, that's turned out to be really, really good as well. Just because of the nature, it can't flex. It's very good at not letting oxygen into a tin. You know, you think of your baked bean tins and things like that. They're long lasting, right? So it's the same with coffee. You want to be using that, and you effectively would like to be storing it in a darker place, not in the fridge. So please don't put your coffee in the fridge, people.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Do not store coffee.
So why is that?
Do not store coffee in fridges. It's just so again, with the coldness, it affects the temperature, changes the coffee profile, but it effectively enhances the staleness of it. So again, do not store coffee in fridge, despite what this was actually like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago to 15 years ago. This was the common thing, was to always store your coffee in your fridge. And to be fair, that is what we were told you should do. But upon sort of more scientific research, it's now been found that having coffee in your fridge and storing it there, it just reduces those aromas and the flavor profiles of your coffee. So it's better to have it stored outside. Standard things, don't put it directly in the sun. Keep it in a cool, dry place, and that will preserve your coffee far longer than most. So yeah. So I just wanted to address that little thing in there.
Thank you. Yeah. I've been grinding my coffee for about 9 months now, since my mum bought me a little handheld grinder. So every morning I have my freshly ground coffee. And at Christmas I bought some pre-ground coffee for the first time in a while, and I brewed it, and it remarkably tasted amazing. I was like, this just tastes good. That was because it was fresh out of the packets, and I know that when it's stored in a packet, it's not oxygen that's in that packet. That's the
When you buy it, it's still releasing the beans are still it's still releasing carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Hence why you have the little circular discs and things on the back. It's to effectively release the gases that still exist.
They pump in another gas into the packet, don't they? So they get rid of the oxygen. So that's even buying store ground coffee and keeping it sealed is keeping it fresh for a while.
But it is preferred to take it out of the packet. It's better to have an aluminium tin than it is to keep it inside a paper packet, because ultimately oxygen particles can pass through that packet quite easily and therefore oxidizes again.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about that?
The other thing that I want to bring up when it comes to coffee is the trend for 2025, the coffee trend.
Oh, tell us, what is the trend?
So the latest thing for 2025, which I can see this sticking around for quite a long time, half and half now is the big thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I've tried this.
Yeah.
Because I have a caffeine-free lifestyle. But I did try to, because now I have my own grinder, I can now mix in my own concoction of how much caffeine I can bring in. I have some caffeinated coffee and have some decaf coffee. And I tried, it wasn't necessarily half and half, it's more like a quarter caffeinated and 3/4.
Right.
And personally for me, I noticed it. I noticed the caffeine and noticed the effect it had on my brain and my mind clouds when I have caffeine. That's just something very personal to me. And it made me realize that I just needed to have a 100% decaf lifestyle. But curious, like, are people now experimenting with having
more so now,
less caffeine?
Yes, exactly. So the big thing is to now effectively have a half and half. So again, it might not be exactly half and half. Every roastery will do it slightly differently, but the principle still remains the same in that people will still like a little bit of a caffeine hit, but they ultimately, when it comes to the afternoons, they're still finding themselves to be later on in the evenings. They could be there going to bed and they're not wired, but their brain won't switch off. And actually, the half and half is working out really well for a lot of people because you still have a little bit of that caffeine hit, so it still gets you through the afternoon without keeping you awake at night. And it's still these days as well, as particularly with decaf, it's so good these days. Many people, they can't really tell a huge difference between the caffeinated and the decaf profiles. And this also allows for coffee roasters to experiment with different origins, different regions, So you could have a Colombian decaf mixed in with a single origin Brazil or something like that. So, yeah.
This must be hard for companies to do because you can't control the beans that are in. Maybe you can do it with ground coffee because it mixes better. But from a coffee making business point of view, if someone comes to you and says they want half and half, do you have the facilities to even do that?
I mean, ultimately, the realities of half and half is pretty much the same of just creating roasting two separate coffee beans. So you will roast your caffeinated and then you'll roast your decaf, and then predominantly it is just about the actual roasting process is still the same.
But if I wanted a coffee from your van and I asked for half and half,
in terms of
could you do that?
As in, I did. I've started doing it. Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's not what
how do you do it?
I would say mine is not. I'm not the ideal setup, but I can do it.
You got to basically grind two and then kind of maybe mix a bit.
No, that is precisely it. Yeah, it's precisely it. It's like with the portafilter,
right?
Just
because you basically have
one half shot,
one grinder for caffeine, one grinder for decaf.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not as if you can just mix two beans at the top. No. You have to mix them once they're ground.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not the ideal setup for me because if you were to have a whole hopper and it would be full of the beans would have been perfectly mixed in there together. So, they'd be coming through the hopper and through the machine at the same time, through the grinder. But unfortunately, I do not have that luxury.
Now you've announced this, a lot of people are going to be asking you for half and halves now. Just increasing your workflow.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I would love it. I would love every minute of it. Okay, guys. So please do come along and try some half and half. Okay. It's very on trend for 2025.
All right. Thank you very much for your coffee advice. Very interesting insight, actually, especially the half and half. And decaf is very popular at the moment. Even James Hoffman did a decaf tasting project recently. Yep. I've actually got some of that coffee, which I haven't done any tasting yet. But when I have the chance to consistently make 4 different brews to the same kind of level, I will. Yeah. Maybe we can talk about that next time. I think we can close things, but I think I want to close things on a lighter note. there are two sections of this podcast which I would like to introduce. The one, after the popularity of the reel that I shared last week of me talking about acronyms and your kind of confusion in working out what they meant, I think we both thought that we could highlight that. You've said that I think there needs to be a section where I give you acronyms and we... So I've got a few for you. We have actually different categories.
I was going to say, are there levels to this? I feel like there should almost be levels.
I'm going to give you a few from each one. Okay. Do you want something easy to begin with?
Well, I suppose that's what we're about to find out though, aren't we, Tom? Is it like, what is easy?
Okay. There's a topic called government and politics, which sounds hard, but actually it's, let's go into this.
Okay.
Let's go with NATO.
I can't actually tell you exactly what NATO is.
You know what it is?
I know. Yeah. Like National Alliance. No. I actually don't know what NATO actually stands for.
I think I would struggle. I think I knew perhaps maybe the first two.
So it's not National Alliance.
No.
Damn, Alliance felt like a good one.
Yeah.
There,
It would surprise you actually. The first two, North Atlantic.
Okay.
Treaty Organization.
Yeah, I won't lie. I would not have got that. Clearly, well, I didn't. So there we go. Sorry, NATO. I probably should know that.
Okay, do you want something in the world of science and technology?
Yeah.
This one, I don't know what this means. DNA. Interesting, yeah?
Oh, no.
How does no one know?
Nuclear, and nucleus.
Close.
Come on, Ed.
Close.
Nuclei or something.
Yes.
Okay.
Nucleic is that form of it, but you still need the D and the A.
The D and the A, I'm slightly, the district attorney, I'm slightly ruined on, to be honest. No.
Yeah.
Dissolve, divisive, design. Data.
I didn't know this. I should have guessed. I should have guessed myself, really. I might need the internet to help me how to describe this.
Distinct, divergent.
Hang on, here we go. This is the internet's pronunciation.
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
Deoxyribonucleic acid. Oh, okay. So the nucleic
acid. Sorry.
Okay, so that's the N. That's the N and the A. I'm guessing, right? It wasn't
deoxyribonucleic acid.
Nucleic acid. Okay. Deoxy.
I don't even need to have the acronym to not even know how to say this. Okay. Deoxy. Okay.
Who'd have known? DNA. We use it so commonly. Yeah. Okay. Companies. I wonder if you know this one. ITV.
No. Is it a person? Is it the initial? Are they initials of a person?
No, ITV.
Yeah.
It's a company.
Yes, I know that.
It's not a person.
No, but as in the company named after a person.
No, there's no.
No, so there's nothing like, it's not like Ian.
You can guess, I'm sure you can guess the TV, right?
Yeah, well, the television, that part, but I was like thinking of the international, but then it's not international. It is. Oh, okay. Right, okay.
This would surprise you. Considering
industry,
considering how you see ITV placed, it means independent television
and entirely reliant on taxpayers' money.
Well, no, it's not. That's BBC.
Yeah, I know.
No, that's not BBC. That's
ITV. Is
ITV.
That's adverts.
It's independent. On adverts.
Yeah,
it's not really independent.
No,
really, is
yeah,
it?
Yeah.
Insane. Okay. Let's give you some more.
Okay.
All right. In the world of education.
Okay, which I do not have, so let's see.
GCSE.
It's actually so hard.
Come on, we've all done them.
I know.
I've got many GCSEs. You must have too.
I don't actually even know. Oh. I actually don't know. Otherwise, I was going to say grammar school. It's nothing to do with that because grammar school is not even a grammar school, is it? That you do. C in the E, children's education, somewhere in there.
Education is the E.
I could get that. Yeah, I figured like that one. C. No, not college.
To give you a hint, the S has something to do with the level of education in terms of
standards.
No, in terms of like which type of school. It's not
With an S.
It's not primary.
Secondary.
Yes. So there you need the G and the C.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was like college because you need it to go, but no. What is it?
It is General Certificate of Secondary Education.
Okay.
There we go. Got a few of them.
How nuts, though, is it that, I mean, apart from the fact that I'm sure the majority of people will probably get most of these acronyms, you hear these all the time, and yet I would not have, I don't even think to actually discover what they are. I don't like this game as much anymore.
Okay, social media or texting.
World Wide Web.
Yeah, we had the AMA last time. Do you remember that?
Yes. Ask me anything.
Good.
Yes.
Well done. Let's go for... hang on, we had this last time. I don't think you understood what it was. TLDR.
No, I still don't know what this means.
Come on.
I didn't even look at it when we got back. Isn't it like... no, I know this one. I remember the first part, I think. It's like too long. DR, like... Oh, too long didn't read.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Well done.
You did actually tell me that. That is the only reason why I remember is that I've had to go back through my memory to be like, what was it? We did say that one. Yeah.
Okay, a couple more. OMW.
Is this used within the social media context or just is this not really? Or it can be, but...
Let's say this would be texting. OMW.
Oh, on my way.
Yeah, good one. Yes. Okay, one last one.
Yeah.
TTYL.
Oh. I've seen it as well. Can you use phone a friend? Could I have the context of it?
Okay.
Or use it within a contextual
I might
setting?
finish a message with this.
Finish?
We might have had a conversation via text and then I will say...
Talk to you later?
Yes! TTYL. If you don't use that to me in your next text message,
I will send you a message.
TTYL. Okay,
it's not
great.
like Tigger and like TTFN. Please tell me you know TTFN.
No. Oh, the roles are reversed.
Finally. Okay. TTFN.
TTFN.
Yeah, Tigger from Winnie the Pooh used to say it.
Oh.
Very similar context.
Is talk the first one?
No.
No? Take.
Although actually, now that I think about it, the first two letters are the first two letters, the word is the same.
Ooh. Take. Tag. Tig.
No, to be honest. Okay.
Friend.
Finally,
Is friend in there?
No.
Now? Is that
Yes.
it? Now? Okay,
Yes.
now. Is it in the same context of like TTYL?
Yeah.
Now. Something now. For now. For now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for now. Something along
I said you've got for now, yes.
For now. Ooh.
And I said the
get in
first
there.
two letters there, the word is the same. But you wouldn't. You wouldn't look at it as it's more slang. than it is.
Ta-ta. For now. Oh, great teamwork. TTFN.
TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now. Lovely.
Oh,
Great.
okay.
Great little segment. Okay, so the final segment I want to introduce as a new feature, which might be an ongoing thing depending on how good I am at telling stories, is what I would like to call Great British MisAdventures. I have, over the years, encountered many stories where I have either done something embarrassing out in the wild or some kind of funny instance of something happening. I've collated some of these stories and I've written down a little headline in a little jar with pieces of paper, and I want you to pull out one today and I will tell that story. And I'll give you the jar.
Let's, yeah.
Here is the jar.
Great British MisAdventures. Yeah. In a cool jar.
So in this jar, there's probably about 7 or 8 different pieces of paper, each have a headline on, which corresponds to a story which I have to tell about something embarrassing or funny that happened in my life. You're going to pick one randomly. I'm not going to know what it is, and I'll tell that story, and hopefully it might be funny. We'll see.
I like the tape on the jar as well. This feels very authentic. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Ready? Okay. All right, Tom. The story we will be telling today is Side-Boob. Do you like that boob? That's my side.
The best of all the boobs.
The greatest.
I'm happy you picked this one out.
I am happy I picked this one out
You
too.
were involved in this story. We can tell this together, actually. This can be a joint effort because you were present in this story.
I do remember this, yes.
This was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think 2022, Love Trails Festival in the Gower Peninsula. First time we properly connected and met. We knew each other vaguely, but this was a sliding doors moment. I could have gone and not had a day with you that day. I was going to go on a bus to go to the other side of the island, to the peninsula, go to the beach and then run back on my own. I missed the bus, so I came back to camp and I had a whole day when I didn't know what to do. And you were like, I'm going to go do the half marathon trail run.
Yeah, but I think I also missed the boat when it came to it. So it was quite fortuitous that both of us were horribly unorganized that morning.
So the plan was hatched. The two of us would run together.
Yeah.
And we had a fantastic run together, running around the Gower Peninsula. We stopped to go for a swim in the blue, what's it called? The blue pool.
Yeah.
Which is a big highlight. And it's actually where this story begins. So we were running, we were chatting. I was telling you about the podcast during our run, as it was just an idea in my head at that time. I hadn't actually done any work to put it out there. I was telling you funny stories, some of which are in that jar. And then we clambered down to the beach to go and have a dip in the blue pool. And this is a beach that at low tide, there's lots of sand, but there's this like tidal pool that's left with a pool of water in, which is very common for people to go swimming in. And there were loads of people who were also doing their run and stopping there and going for a swim. As per nature, there's no changing rooms. So we had to just get into our trunks out in the open. But there was like this, where the tidal pool is, there's like this like huge rocks. So there's like these alcoves and places where you can kind of find a little bit of privacy where you can get changed. And the two of us got changed into our trunks, went into the blue pool, and then we ran into the sea and had a frolic in the sea. And then we returned back to our bags to try and get changed, only to find that area of this natural changing pool, that area of the natural changing rooms had been taken by some girls who were in the process of getting changed back out of their swim gear into their run gear. Us being the polite guys that we are, gave them some space. Would you agree?
I think
so. A correct, accurate description of
absolutely.
What's going on so far.
Privacy is important, so absolutely. We can help it.
But there's not really much spaces to hide in that area. So we were, nearby. And then on occasions, we would just take a little glance to the side, to our area where our bags were, to see if the area was free or not. And the girls were still getting dressed. On one of those glances, perhaps myself, and you do too, but I don't think we exchanged thoughts.
I don't think I did, to be honest. That's the whole point.
Me?
That's the whole point.
No.
Like, this is your story. This is your story.
Really
I
bad.
know this story. I was present at it, but I did not get I did not have the same reception.
Upon taking a glance, I happened to see a girl still getting dressed, and unfortunately, in that very, very fractious glance time, there was a certain part of her body that was revealed to me because she was, in the process of, having a towel around her, getting changed. There were bits of body everywhere all the time. there just happened to be a little bit of her side boob that I caught a tiny glance of, and I was not peeking. I was purely seeing if the space was free yet for us to get changed, and I caught a glimpse of a side boob. And I apologize to whoever this is who was getting there. I was not preying on you in any way. I just caught a very small glance. I want to stress it was a very small glance.
Stuck with you though, this hasn't it though? You know, this image of a side boob.
Well,
The fact that you brought this up, this is one of your stories right now, can only
eventually
say something.
Eventually, the girls departed, they got dressed, and we were able to return back to our bags, and we ourselves, began the process of getting changed and getting our clothes back on, probably revealing various elements of our own bodies to people who were nearby, should they want to look.
And proud.
And very proud. And then we began our run, continuing doing the half marathon, at which point I admitted to you the awkwardness of that moment when we were waiting for these girls to get changed, and how I glimpsed upon one of the girls' side boob, which I will happily admit is my favourite part of boob. There is something so, what's the word?
I'd almost want to say titillating, but then that's also probably a little bit too much in this. It is titillating. It is...
There is the...
it is the fact that it is something like...
there's the
when you reveal less, but
there's the
more.
mystery behind it.
There is mystery behind the side boob.
Yeah, it's teasing. It's saying, here is a glimpse, but what lies beyond, you will never see. Is purely up to your imagination. I mean, she wasn't teasing because she wasn't aware of this, but we got to... I'm digging my hole here.
I am silent throughout all of this.
No, how much do I put in the edit?
Hang on, let me get you another shovel. Let's keep going on this one.
It was not unique to her side boob. It was just more a general. I guess I was saying a general kind of statement that side boobs are the best part of a boob.
The imagination, what it leaves. I can imagine.
So that was my Love Trails 2022.
Yes, and so then Tom went on his way, ran for the rest of the trip, just with an image of a side boob in your head, pretty much. Going
and now 2.5 years later, we're now talking about it on a podcast.
Yeah. Maybe it's a very British thing as well, though, isn't it? Just like you catch that sudden glimpse of it, it just throws you off into it catches you unawares. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Like, goodness, where? Look everywhere. Look anywhere else but anywhere in that general direction.
Are you a fan of the side boob?
Of course. Mm-hmm. The side boob is a beautiful part of the boob.
Okay, lovely. I guess that's a great place to end it. With that image in people's mind.
Ending with boobs.
Side boobs.
Side boobs.
It's important. And I want to clarify, it's not a story about boobs. It's a story about side boob. It's the particular...
I was thinking to say it was like a particular side boob of an individual we will never know.
Yes, that was the inspiration behind it. But this is an ode to all side boobs out there.
Yeah.
And I just want to celebrate the side boob in
community.
General. Yes, and may they flourish for years to come.
May they flourish. Oh, I love it.
Great. Thank you very much for joining me again for a catch-up. I don't know if anyone has got anything important out of this conversation. Who knows? Maybe they have. We hope so.
We hope so. Thank you very much for listening, though, guys. And do remember to subscribe, okay? It's very important to us, okay, that we at least double our output from the previous podcast and get to 1 subscriber. So please do your part. We love you very much. Thank you.
If anyone is offended by my side boob story, please do not unsubscribe. Because
yeah, there's plenty more stories to pick out of this jar, by the way. So
yeah, there's better ones to come.
We've got plenty to go through. Don't you worry.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll see you, or TTYL, in a few months' time.